Assalamu alaikum everybody. My name is Ustadha Tasneem and I am the assistant head and head of early years at Date Valley School, in case you don't already know me. And I am hosting our first parent workshop, which is called Chatter Matters, and it's all about speaking and listening. So I am going to pull up my slides and then I will talk you through the presentation. Okay, so effective communication with a young child is essential for brain development and their well-being, in the same way that a proper balanced diet is essential for the development of a healthy body. Communication is a key skill for life, and you cannot form social relationships without communication. So if we think about the kind of things that we have to do which rely on communication, we express our feelings, we exchange views and knowledge, we share ideas, we explain what we're thinking. All of these things rely on having good communication skills. And communication with young children can take many forms, including reading stories, books, singing songs together, painting, playing games, even something as silly as tickling each other. And a diet of all of these activities will enable children to develop into effective and successful communicators. If you cannot communicate effectively verbally, then you cannot learn to read and write. So studies have shown that those children with poor communication skills don't achieve well academically, because if you can't say it, then you can't read and write it. You especially cannot write it. And so those children who don't achieve well academically, they tend to not have a good prognosis for their life success. So it's important that we get it right, and we get it right while the children are young. So studies have shown that in some parts of the UK, there's over 50% of children who start school with poor language skills. And schools can't do everything. I know we're amazing, but there's a belief that children can learn basic skills like speaking and listening at school, and parents don't need to do anything at home. And I just wanted to point out that a child's brain growth occurs most during the first 3 years of life, but most especially during the first year. And that's the time when the child is with you and not with us at school. And having these poor language skills means that your child can start school with a deficit, which is not what we want. We want every child to start school with a very solid foundation and be able to handle the new environment in school. And I want you to just imagine if you were to go to a foreign country where you didn't know the language, how would you feel? Chances are you'd feel confused. You've got people talking at you, and you don't understand anything, and you also can't speak back to them because you don't know anything to do with the language. So you're confused, probably fed up and frustrated, and maybe a bit uncomfortable as well. So the last thing you'd want to do in that kind of environment is learn, because you just don't feel comfortable, you don't feel at ease, you don't know what the people around you are saying. So why would you want to learn anything? And if you put that into a school situation, well, we have to tackle those basic needs of making the child feel comfortable by ensuring that they can communicate first, and then they can thrive, and then they can learn. Now, children need to get along with one another, and this can't be done without communication skills. And without the ability to talk to one another, the playground is a very hard environment to cope with. And children with poor communication skills, they tend to exhibit biting, hitting, scratching, grabbing, because that's their form of communication. That's how they communicate that they want something. They can't say, I want that, give it to me. And then this tends to lead to friendship problems, which then can lead on to social isolation and becoming withdrawn. And that then leads on to a whole host of other problems, social problems that you can have further down the line. But if children know how to communicate with one another, then they'll settle into school quickly, they'll be able to get their needs met because they're able to speak to someone, and they'll be able to make friends easily, which is what we want for our children. So communication starts from birth between the infant and the primary caregiver, or the mother, which is usually the mother. And the infant has to communicate to get their needs met. sorry, that's supposed to say needs met, not meets met. And most of the time, this is through crying. And we tend to work out what their cries mean after a while. But most parents know what to do with young children. They know they need to feed them, they need to clean them and keep them warm, and they need to find a way to stop them crying. But some parents may lack the skills to know how to interact with their baby. And this is especially if they didn't have positive interactions in their own upbringing. So it may be that they don't know that they should read the baby a story or sing songs, and that will be a form of helping the child to learn to communicate. So, you know, sometimes our children lack skills because of the parenting skills that we ourselves have. So I found this fantastic speech chain at a workshop that I attended about language, and it just shows how complex communication really is. And to be quite honest, looking at this, it's any wonder that we actually communicate at all, because it is so difficult. So first of all, we start off over here with hearing the words. So you can hear words but not actually be listening, so you have to hear it and also listen. It's very easy to tune out, especially if you're doing something, a nice exciting activity, or you're doing something where you have to concentrate a lot. So you may be able to hear things going on in the background, but you might not be actually listening in. So you've got to hear, then you've got to listen. You've got to understand the words as well. You then have to think of what you're going to say and choose the right words to answer back. So if you imagine children have like a filing cabinet or a library, for example, like behind me, a library of words that they have, they've got a vocabulary bank in their head. They've got to find the right word that would make sense to as a form of response to what they've heard. They then have to choose the order of the sentence to make sure it makes sense. They've got to use the correct grammar as well, choose the right sounds, because otherwise saying something might be taken out of context and it might sound different. So for example, something like good for you may be misinterpreted because of the way you say it. So you may say good for you, meaning well done, that's really good. Or you may say good for you, which doesn't quite mean the right thing and doesn't have the same kind of positive connotations. You then have to coordinate all of the muscles and, you know, get your jaw working and everything. And then finally, you say the word. So it just shows how complex communication really is. One thing you really need to do as parents, and we try and do it at school as well, is model rich language. So instead of saying you're tired, so instead of saying, oh, I'm really tired, why not say, I'm exhausted? Because then the child will pick up on that. They'll probably want to find out what that word means. And when you tell them, oh, it means I'm really, really tired, then at some point they will remember that word and they'll remember to use it. So when they are really, really tired one day, they may come out with, I'm exhausted. And it's a fantastic word to add to their vocabulary bank. So interactions between the infant and the primary caregiver start from day one, and actually start from before day one. It's all about bonding with the child, but actually an infant can hear from 2 months before its birth. So it's important that you make sure there's lots of communication so that the child can recognize your voice when it comes out of the womb. And those first few days, first few weeks, it's all about bonding with the child and building a relationship between the parent and the child. So the adults need to speak to the baby from birth to model communication. And it doesn't matter that the child doesn't understand something, because what the baby will do is they will look at facial expressions, they will try and mimic the sounds, and they'll start making gurgling sounds, and then they will learn about turn taking. So they'll learn that when you make a sound, then they make a sound, and then you take your turn and you make a sound again. So they learn the art of turn taking during those first few weeks and months. And responding to the infant's needs and responding to those noises that they make sends the message to them that their communication attempts are understood, they're acted upon, and they're valued as well, which encourages the child to communicate more, because they get that reward that when they make a noise, then you make a noise back, and that's very rewarding for them. So eye contact between a parent and a baby is very powerful, and it occurs naturally during the feeding process, or when you're changing clothes or changing the nappy. And as I said before, when the babies babble or gurgle, they get a response from the adult. It's a very rewarding experience for the child, and it leads them to want to do it more. When adults repeat words, especially when associated with a certain event like bath time, then it leads to understanding that this word means something to do with this event. So if you say, if you associate bath time with the rubber ducks, for example, then they will, even though they don't understand, they will hear that sound and they'll know it means something to do with bath time. So other opportunities to introduce language are reading. So even if your child doesn't know how to read, then you can just have picture books. You can have bedtime stories, which is a fantastic way of introducing routine to children. So touchy-feely books, you know, the books which are called, you know, that's not my dinosaur, it's too prickly or whatever, where the child can feel, you know, different textures and lift the flat books when they're a bit older. So these are opportunities to share communication. It has a calming effect, especially if you do it at night time before they're going to go to sleep. Then it's just a nice way to calm everything down, because everything's been crazy during the daytime and now it's time to calm down. It gets them into a routine, and you can start asking questions about the pictures in the books, even if the child can't respond to you. But as they get older, you'll find that they will be able to respond. And even if it's something like, what color is the duck? The duck is yellow. And you know, that's a way of building communication skills in young children. Repeating stories is very important, and you may think, oh no, I'm not going to read this book again because I've read it already, but actually it helps a child to memorize the story, and then children, when they get older, they can actually tell you when you've made a mistake, and they can actually retell the story for you. So it helps to model sentence structure and sequencing as well. So this is very good literacy and numeracy skills, which happen without writing anything down. It's just using a storybook. So songs are essential. So think about different types of songs. You might not want to have action songs at bedtime because it'll make your child quite hyper, and so you'll want to have nice calming songs like lullabies or maybe some Quran. And it helps to develop language as well. So for example, if brushing teeth or brushing hair is a particularly traumatic event in your household, then it may be that you find a way of singing songs which calms things down and makes it easier and more enjoyable. It also helps to model sentence structure, and children love the repetitive nature of songs. And actually, songs and nursery rhymes help children learn to read. And studies have shown that those children who know about 8 nursery rhymes by the time they're 5 go on to become very successful readers. So there's some kind of correlation between memorizing nursery rhymes and songs and being able to read. So action songs I'm thinking of are Row, Row, Row the Boat, or The Wheels on the Bus, Head, Shoulders, Knees and Toes, all of these things, 5 Little Ducks, you know, all of these things, fantastic for literacy and numeracy, and no worksheets, no pens, no paper, no nothing. Okay, very easy to do. Just need to come out of your comfort zone and do these kind of things and not worry about what other people may think. One other thing is, if you find brushing hair, for example, is quite a traumatic event, then maybe by having things like hair bands which have got animals or you know, certain objects on them, ice creams or whatever, then it can help children, it can help them become distracted by the trauma of having their hair brushed or their teeth brushed or whatever, because you can ask them questions such as, you know, what animal can you see on your hairband, or what color is your hairband, and it helps them to develop that language that way. Things like walking up and down stairs, very, very simple, and it's a very good opportunity to count. So you can talk about positional language. So you can talk about we're going up or we're going down and I'm next to you and all of these kind of things. So it's a fantastic way of introducing numeracy and counting skills. Cooking is an absolutely amazing skill, an amazing opportunity. And you can talk to the children about what you're doing. So I'm cutting up the onions, I'm crying because the onions are making me cry. And if you get the children involved, it keeps them busy as well, because sometimes the reason children kick off and have tantrums or whatever is because they're bored and they just want your attention. So if you're able to give them something to do, like stirring or whatever, obviously making sure it's safe for them to do so, then it's an excellent opportunity of bonding, of introducing language and keeping the children busy. Bath time, fantastic time again. So you can play games, you can name body parts, and, you know, excellent opportunity to increase their language. Shopping. Now, I'm sure at this stage you're going to say, you know what, Tasneem, you don't know what you're talking about, okay? Shopping is a trauma if I take my children, but actually one of the reasons it becomes so traumatic is because children are bored, okay? They get stuck into a trolley, they can't reach anything, they can't touch anything, and, you know, after a while they've just had enough. Yeah, there's too much going on. Very bright lights, chances are there's some kind of background music going on or so many noises, it's just too stimulating for them. But actually, if we involve our children in shopping, then it can turn from being a nightmare to being a source of entertainment as well as a source of learning opportunities for them. So if children are involved in a process, they're less likely to cause behavioral issues or having tantrums in shops and make you have to walk out without actually getting your shopping done. So think about the kind of things you can do. You can encourage them to count. So you can say, okay, I want 5 apples. Can you count out 5 apples for me? Talk about colors. So I don't want green apples, I want red apples. Can we find the red apples? So you can encourage the children as they get a little bit older to go and fetch the items off the shelf. Obviously, it's got to be within their reach. And then they can drop the things into the trolley. You can get them to take it in turns as well. Even when you're bringing the shopping home, you can get the children to help you unload the shopping. So you can say, here's the bread. Let's put the bread in the, I don't know, in the freezer. Or let's put the bread in the bread bin, for example. And then the children will actually be able to help you to get your shopping done and get your shopping put away. Now, this takes time, okay? So I know everyone is very, very busy. Everyone's got busy lives, but sometimes we need to take that time out to encourage the children to help us, and then it will make our life so much easier. So some other opportunities to introduce languages, a period of dead time, such as walking to and from the car. So you may do this when you're coming out of school or going to school. So, but you have to be very careful with the kind of questions you choose. So say, for example, how was your day? A question like that is very closed because chances are the answer you'll get is fine. If you ask, what did you do? Chances are your child will say nothing. And believe me, your child does not do nothing at school all day, okay? But you need to think about the kind of questions which will actually encourage a bit of thought and a bit of conversation. So questions such as, who are your friends? Why do you like them? What did you play with them today? You know, those kind of questions will encourage more conversation, and you'll be able to find out a little bit more about what's happening. Dinner time, again, is an excellent opportunity. It's a family time when you can discuss the day's events. And I do this even with my children who are much older. So my children are 16 and 13. But even, you know, the dinner table is where we come together, and I tend to tell them what's happened, you know, what funny things have happened at school during the day, and they're able to offer their opinions. And it just has that, it just gives that opportunity for conversation. One thing I would recommend is make sure that you don't have phones at the table, no phones, no smartphones, no iPads or anything, because otherwise that cuts the opportunity to introduce language to the children. So now I'm going to talk about the TV and also bringing up to the 21st century, the iPad, the smartphone, the computer. So without a doubt, the TV is an excellent source of being able to hear words and have a visual stimulus. And there are times when you need your child to just watch something to give you 5 minutes break. And I get that, okay? I'm a parent as well, and I totally understand that. And you know, whatever you put on for the children is an excellent source of new vocabulary. Obviously, you need to make sure that the kind of program you're putting on for your child is suitable for their age, so that they don't pick up any inappropriate words. However, the problem with the TV or the iPad or the smartphone or the computer or whatever is that it doesn't respond when the child speaks to it. So actually, what is a better option is if you watch TV with your child, and having that joint or shared activity makes it more meaningful, because you can talk about what you see, and it just gives that opportunity for conversation. It can actually give you that 5 minutes time out as well, where you don't have to be very active in it, but you can just say, oh, I like that dress that girl's wearing, or whatever. It's just that opportunity for a bit of language there. But I do understand there are times when you just need the child to have some time out so that you can get 5 minutes of breathing space. One thing I would recommend very, very strongly is you don't have these kind of gadgets in your child's bedroom, because it interacts on, it will impact on the child's social interactions, on their sleep patterns, and on their play. A child won't want to go out to play if they've got the TV in their bedroom. So, you know, we want to encourage children to be active, to have active lives. So it's important that the TV is kept out of their bedroom. Dummies and pacifiers. Now, you may be thinking, well, you know what, you're speaking a bit too late about this kind of thing because my child is older. But just as a side point, dummies and pacifiers shouldn't be used except at sleep time if necessary, because actually it inhibits speech. And a quiet baby is not necessarily a happy baby. Sometimes a quiet baby may mean a happy mummy for 5 minutes, but in the long run, it's something that's going to inhibit speech, because the child won't, if they've got something in their mouth, they're not going to be able to talk. So what kind of things can we do to encourage a conducive environment for good communication skills? So the first thing we have to do is get down to our child's level. So rather than talk over them, we're talking at them. So really get down to their level. And that's what we do in school. Young children, when they're doing something, when they're busy doing an activity, they tend to tune out what's going on around them and focus on their activity. So they find it difficult to listen and carry on with whatever they're doing. So by getting down to their level, you're encouraging them to stop what they're doing. You need to get their attention first of all, and the best way of getting their attention is, the best way of getting their attention is to say their name first. So then that encourages them to stop what they're doing and pay attention to what you're saying. There are lots and lots of sounds around them, you know, both in the home and in the school environment, and lots of sounds, this sound bombardment that we seem to have in our lives nowadays. It stops language development. So what we need to make sure we do is we reduce or minimize the background noise, because this will help children to pay attention, because they're not being distracted by the other noises around them. Children and adults tend to need silence to think and to reflect. So by removing noise distractions, we're actually helping the child to learn language. And being at the child's level means that they'll be able to pick up on non-verbal communication, such as your facial expression. So if you're down on the floor with them and you're looking at them quite cross, saying, I've been calling you for so long and you're not listening to anything I'm saying, then they're going to look at your facial expression and see, oh, you know what, they're a bit angry. Oh no, what have I done? And you know, it's going to be a source of anxiety for them. So we need to make sure that our facial expressions reflect positivity so that our children respond to us. We should use simple, repetitive language. So when children are learning language, you need to keep sentences short. There's no point in saying, please can you go and get this and then get that, because the child has got no idea what you're saying. So you have to keep language very, very short for them as they're learning, and then gradually the sentences can get bigger. So it may be coat on. It's as simple as that. So shoes on, not please can you go and put your shoes on, because that's too long, that's too much for the child to have to digest. So while the children are young, describe your everyday activities, talk to them while you're doing things, and say things often, because then that helps children to join in and pick up new words. So when you're cooking, for example, then you can talk about chop, chop, chop. And you know, then the child will learn that word and they'll associate it with what you're doing, and they'll be able to pick up those new words as well. Giving children plenty of time to respond. So if I take you back to this diagram here, you can see just how complex the communication chain is. So for that reason, we need to make sure that we give children plenty of thinking time. We maintain eye contact, and we don't finish their sentence for them or speak for them, because otherwise the children aren't going to learn how to speak. They're going to assume that you're going to know what they're talking about, and they're going to become lazy and not find the reason to speak. Be careful with the kind of questions you ask them. So we need to work on talking to our children, not quizzing them. So, and children need to learn the art of conversation. So when you bombard them with questions, it blocks that flow of communication and conversation. So instead of saying, how can we make? You could say, I wonder how we could make our cake rise higher. I wonder what will happen if, because then the sentence starter, I wonder, actually invites a response, because you're thinking out loud, and then the child will think of a way to respond back to you. Whereas if you're saying, how could we make this? What will happen? Why hasn't that worked? Then it's almost like you're bombarding the child with lots and lots of questions and quizzing them, and then that can make a child feel very anxious and not want to respond to those questions. Talk clearly, so build on what the child says to you. So add 1 or 2 more words to what the child says. So if your child has said, look, car, then reply back with, look, red car. And then that means that the child the child understands that you've heard them, you've valued what they've said, and you're modeling how to move on to that next stage of language development. Rather than criticize, demonstrate the right way. So no one likes being criticized, especially not children. So when children make mistakes in the way they speak, what we need to do is model the correct way of speaking. So for example, if a child says, I runned in the park, then you know, our instincts may say, you ran, not runned. So why not try saying, you ran, did you? Or yes, you ran. Because that way, the child will acknowledge, okay, I made a mistake. It should be ran and not runned. And they'll remember to say that next time round. A child who is criticized will never want to develop, because they'll always be scared that they're going to make a mistake. And we see that a lot in school, where children are scared of taking risks because they're worried about making mistakes. And they need to understand that it's okay to make mistakes, and actually coming to school and learning means that they will make mistakes, but then they'll learn from those mistakes. So a child who is encouraged is a child who will excel in their development, which is what we all want for our children. If you want your child to be saying please and thank you, then you have to be modeling it yourself. Obviously, that's as they get a little bit older. That's not when they're 2 or 3 and starting to learn how to speak, because at that stage you don't really need the please and thank you. But as they get older, if you want to instill those manners, then you need to be modeling it yourself. Otherwise, the child won't copy you. And going back to the issue of confidence, when someone is criticized, it affects their confidence. I'm sure we all know that as adults. And without confidence, you won't know what you're capable of, and you'll always stick to what's in your comfort zone. So you won't even try to do something a bit different because you're worried. Okay, so it's very, very important that what we do, we model rather than criticize. So doing an activity regularly. So what I would say is, if you're going to do something like reading, then 5 minutes every day is better than 30 minutes once a week. Okay, because it's that little and often and that repetitive activity that will help make progress. You can offer options. So for example, rather than put your shoes on, then why not try something like, would you like your red shoes or your blue shoes? Now, probably as a parent, you don't really care which shoes they put on, but it gives that child that feeling of control. And you just want them to put their shoes on at the end of the day. But actually, by giving them an option, you're handing over control to the child. You're not saying put your shoes on and there's no option. It's which one do you want to put on, because you've got to put one of them on. The when then trick also works in a similar way. So when you've cleaned your teeth, then we can read a story. So, you know, those kind of sentences and communications will help a child to have that control and know what they need to do. So lots of our families speak languages other than English, and back in the olden days, parents may have been told, no, you've got to be speaking English at home. But nowadays, people acknowledge the value that speaking another language holds. But what's important is that the language spoken by one adult should always be consistent. So say, for example, if grandma of the family speaks Italian, then they should always speak Italian with the child, and the child will respond to them eventually in Italian. And if the mum speaks English and only English, then the mum should carry on speaking English. We shouldn't be forcing grandma to speak English. Okay, what will initially happen is that the language development will be quite slow, but then what then happens is the child builds up enough of a word bank in both languages to be able to develop both languages simultaneously. And chances are, if you are fluent in a language such as Italian, then it may be that your English is not as fluent. So rather than model incorrect language, it's better to model the language that you speak confidently and fluently and allow the child to develop. So yes, it will have a bit of a slow start. Language development will have a bit of a slow start, but then it will catch up, and it's an essential skill for our children to learn. So, as I come to the end of the workshop, I just want to remind you why chatter matters. So studies have found that about 70 to 80% of children in young offenders institutes are found to have had some kind of speech and language difficulty. And this is something that could have been corrected when they were younger. But children who don't develop these good communication skills are at risk of struggling to access learning, which leads to social isolation, antisocial behavior, leading to exclusions. And then those excluded children become vulnerable to becoming prey for gangs and grooming. And may Allah protect all of our children from this. And I don't want anyone to be under the illusion that, oh, well, you know, we're Muslim and, you know, it wouldn't happen to our children. Unfortunately, it's a very sad state of affairs that our own children do become vulnerable to being groomed. Children and people in general want to feel a sense of belonging, and if they don't get that in a positive environment, they'll look for it elsewhere. But essentially, speech and language are predictors for future mental health and job prospects. So it's essential that we get this right. Teaching effective communication skills to children may help them to express themselves clearly and convey their feelings in a better way. Communication skills can facilitate learning and allow them to have a meaningful exchange of information with others. A child who can communicate properly verbally will be comfortable producing written communications, because if they can say it, then they can write it as well. And that will help them perform better academically. If children can't speak properly and they can't communicate their feelings, then chances are they'll find writing really, really hard. Communicating well will also boost your child's social IQ by helping them to build social relationships with their interactions with other people. And as we know, having suffered lockdown and being away from each other, communication is key for well-being as well. I hope this has been a useful workshop for you. If you have any questions, I will now invite you to ask any questions you'd like about why chatter matters. Jazakallah khair for listening. Assalamu alaikum.